Welcome back to Under the Knife. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the bodies of the executed. The Murder Act of 1752 decreed that the bodies of all murderers be dissected as an additional punishment for their heinous crimes. Many of the bodies harvested for dissection were taken from Tyburn in London, which was a site of execution since the 12th century. Locals called the permanent scaffold there the deadly nevergreen, the tree which bore fruit all year long. It consisted of 3 posts, each 10 to 12 feet high, held together by 3 wooden crossbars at the top. Between 1169, when the first recorded execution took place, and 1783, when hangings were moved to Newgate Prison, an estimated 60,000 people died at Tyburn. After the passage of the Murder Act, Tyburn became a battleground between the surgeons who needed to procure bodies for dissection and the mob who were desperate to protect the dead. Writing in 1740, Samuel Richardson describes such a scene.
As soon as the poor creatures were half dead, I was much surprised before such a number of peace officers to see the populace fall to hauling and pulling the carcasses with so much earnestness, as to occasion several warmer encounters and broken heads. These were the friends of the persons executed, and some persons sent by private surgeons to obtain bodies for dissection. The contests between these were fierce and bloody and frightful to look at.
The public's desire to see justice did not necessarily include a desire to see the criminal body dissected. Most people believed that after death, the body should remain intact. A sketch made in 1782 by the artist Thomas Rowlandson depicts the interior of William Hunter's Anatomical Museum on the Last Day of Judgment, as resurrected corpses bewilderingly searching for missing body parts. As comical as this may seem, fears about what happened to one's body after death were very real during earlier periods. Before the Day of Reckoning, the condemned went to great lengths to protect their bodies from the dissection table. They appealed to their families, their friends, their lovers, and their acquaintances. Martin Gray begged his uncle to come to his execution in 1721, lest his body should be cut and torn and mangled after death. Sarah Wilmhurst, who was convicted of murdering her bastard child in 1743, was more concerned that her father and brother would fail to secure her body after the execution than with the prospects of death itself. Most telling of all was a plea made by Vincent Davis, who was condemned to die after murdering his wife Elizabeth. During his consignment, Davis, quote, sent many letters to all his former friends and acquaintance to form a company and prevent the surgeons in their designs upon his body. So great were these apprehensions that he should be anatomized, that he desired and wished he might be hanged in chains to prevent it, and with that view affronted the court of justice. Unfortunately, the court did not acquiesce to his pleas. On the day of execution, however, Davis's friends fought the surgeons and won. He was later buried in Clerkenwell. Of course, not everybody facing the dissection table feared it. In 1747, John Wilkins was sentenced to death for robbery on the King's Highway. Finding himself entirely friendless and without any support in prison, Wilkins foolishly inquired after a surgeon to purchase his body in order to supply his present necessities. 5 years later, William Signal traded his body for decent clothes on the day of his execution, as he was, quote, resolved to die game. It wasn't just men and women who ended up on the dissection table. Children were also hanged for murder. On July 29, 1831, John Amy Birdbell was found guilty of murdering a young boy for the sake of a few coins. At his trial, Bell expressed no emotion when he was sentenced to death. He did, however, break down when he was informed that his body would be given over to the surgeons to be dissected. Bell was only 14 years old when he was executed and anatomized. As he made his way to the gallows, he turned to the constable and asked, "He, the murdered child, is better off than I am now. Do you not think so, sir?" The constable agreed. Unfortunately, by the 19th century, the demand for bodies was at an all-time high, just as opinions about surgeons was at an all-time low. In the minds of many, there was very little difference between the surgeon and the executioner. One executed the body, while the other executed the law. Eventually, the deadly nevergreen was taken down after the last criminal, John Austin, was hanged on November 3, 1783. From that point forward, hangings took place just outside the walls of Newgate Prison. Given the close proximity of Surgeons' Hall to the site of execution, it was easier for surgeons to procure bodies for dissection away from the prying eyes of an angry crowd. It wasn't until the Anatomy Act of 1832, when the unclaimed bodies of the poor were made available, that the association between execution and dissection was formally severed.
Ah, Lindsey.
I thought you were dead.
Oh no, change the light bulb.